You still matter, Kit. We want to let you know that. I want to get the three of yours take on the future, and then I'd like to do sort of a round robin because we have two questions outstanding. I've got a third one if someone emailed me, so I want to make sure we address those. But let's talk about the future because I think it's an important idea. Like, where are we going in the RPA sector? Say, 1 to 3 years out. What are we going to be talking about? And how can companies get ready for that? Most importantly, Kit, what is your take on the future of RPA? Maybe the near-term future of RPA. What do you say?
So, I see a couple of things. Yeah, there's definitely going to be more consolidation around those. Yeah, I'm going to roll with the understanding approach. So there's going to be more consolidation into the tooling around understandings. Yeah, the really important parts of the future over the next 15, 18 months are going to be all about pace. And really, real focus on rapidity to live and speed to get live. So I'm expecting to see an increased drive from all of the, across the whole market on speed to get live and simplification. Yeah. And I think it's that simplification of, AI tooling as well, that actually is the real sweet spot for things like RPA. The second bit of
simplification of user interface, just so I'm clear on that. Yeah, okay, right.
No, the simplification of consumption. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was talking to some economists the other week about and they produced a report that said across Europe SMEs, mid-market, big companies. Most big companies have got an AI strategy, but almost no small business has an AI strategy.
Right.
And my response to that was, well, so my wife owns a gardening business. Yeah. She doesn't have an AI strategy, but she does have a tool that she gives to all of her customers that they can take a photo of a plant and it uses AI to tell them what the plant is.
Cool.
Now that's not having an AI strategy, but that simplification makes it consumable. Yeah. Okay. And that's, that taking AI out of the hands of the geeks and into the hands of the community, that's where, RPA is going to be really useful. Yeah.
The democratization of AI and RPA. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
David, your take on the future of RPA, 1 to 3 years out or so, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I would certainly agree with Kit. I think there's a couple of things I would add. One is I am convinced that we're going to see the uprising of the citizen developer. So the non-technical developer that knows nothing about technology, but knows about process, knows what they want, but knows nothing about technology. I'm not sure any of the RPA firms yet are thinking about that, but I think that is going to be absolutely paramount here. The easier you make it to build processes and automations, the more people will do it. And I'm convinced that's where Microsoft are thinking, and others are thinking over time, is how do we make this easier and simpler to do? Second thing is, and the reason I set up Emergence Partners is the companies just don't have strategy. It's not, do they have an AI strategy? They don't have strategy. They really do not know where they're headed. And unless you really know where you're headed and you know what you want to achieve with technology in general, be it RPA or any other technology, you cannot be effective as an organization and you cannot be investing wisely because you don't know where you're headed. I mean, it makes sense that if you don't know where you're headed, you don't know what you should be investing in. Right. So I think there's a lack of strategy as a whole, and that's what we're really focused on, and helping companies find their technology path through that. And at the end of the day, not necessarily launching huge programs, but thinking about how do you use tools like RPA and orchestration tools to help build in the next 6 months. Can I build something or learn something or do something that helps me learn about my future state that I'm looking for in my business? And unless you have that, all you're doing is randomly automating things in the hope that it's in the right direction. So I think the uprising re-emergence of strategy is something that's going to be, right in the center of all of this.
Makes sense. Guy, what do you see in terms of the near-term future of the robotic process automation sector?
Two things really. If you think back to the 80s and early 90s, and yes, I really am that old, we had a plethora of ERP vendors, but it eventually boiled down to two, which was SAP and Oracle. I think exactly the same thing is going to happen within the RPA market over the next 2 to 3 years. I think that will consolidate down, so organizations will acquire capability for themselves or to commercialize, and other of the big, the FANGs effectively, are going to acquire capability, but just because Microsoft has, I think. The second thing,
Guy, be brave. Who's it going to be?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there we go.
Who's going to be? Well, at the moment, I mean, actually, we speak to Maureen Fleming, who's the lead analyst of IDC. And she's just done a whole study on market share and so on. And we thought, Daniel, our chief exec and co-founder, we thought that the TAM, the total addressable market, was large enough to support 4 or 5 RPA vendors. Because as David said, there isn't anywhere that RPA is not applicable if you do it properly. And she said, no, it's just 2. There's just you or UiPath and Automation Anywhere at the moment. I think Microsoft will come in. The Gartner Magic Quadrant is coming out, and I can't tell you what the results are yet, but Microsoft is not a leader.
Oh, okay.
But they're there. So
because Softomotive was there. I don't think Softomotive was absolutely a leader at any point. I mean,
no. I mean, Microsoft isn't a leader. But I can't say anymore. It's not been released yet.
All right. No.
But the other thing that I think is going to happen, and I've been predicting this for quite a while, is that ultimately, probably slightly longer term, all of the stuff that we've been describing today will disappear. It will just disappear. Not because it's not going to get used, but because it's going to get used everywhere.
Right.
That democratization, that simplicity of use, the fact it's embedded in just the way in AI, in the plant identification that Kit mentioned, it will just become a natural part of our day-to-day lives at work and at home. And I don't think there'll be any indication. So when we talk about a robot for every person, at the moment, that's a robot for every employee. But actually, there isn't any reason why it couldn't be a robot for every person, automating bits of your life at home for family and so on that you want it to.
Makes perfect sense. So, all right, that's the future. I've got 3 questions, and in the interest of time, maybe we'll have one each of you address just one, because I think it'd be too long for each of this. So this is a question we've kind of touched on, but let's make sure we address it. With hyper automation emerging as one of the top 10 technology trends in 2020, what impact do we see, and how can companies adopt to this change? We have sort of talked about that. Guy, you want to field that one?
Yes. I mean, we've already talked about it. So
we have.
I think that as organizations recognize that their world has radically changed, not only as a result of COVID, but actually being accelerated by COVID, that digital transformation is critical. What you need, as David said, is a strategy to start with, and then RPA and intelligent automation is a tool or tools for that strategy. There is nothing spectacularly special or magical about RPA, in the same way that there was nothing special or magical about shared service and outsourcing, 20 years ago. But it just makes things easier and more efficient.
I think just to add one colour to that,
please.
The extra challenge with COVID is that digital transformation is going to need to be done because the market's going to need it in an environment where there is less cash to spend, because we're all going to be going through a recession. And so the old school, we're going to digitally transform by ripping up the old big systems and building a spanking new one.
Yeah.
That's no longer going to be happening because the free cash flow to do it isn't going to be there.
I do agree.
Kit, we're going to go through a recession. I think if you look at the American stock market, we decided not to do that. It's a V-shaped recovery. We'll be over it in a month or so. So we
It's
can't
all
really.
peachy.
Yeah, it is. Just please, so don't bring us down.
I've been injecting my toilet duck. It seems to be working.
This is actually a question for David. You mentioned resiliency is necessary for organizations to harness when implementing technology. Is it difficult for organizations to be resilient? And what has emergence seen with the advent of COVID and technology adaptation? What's your view, David?
Yeah, no, very, very interesting question. Thank you. And I think, so resilience is, we see resilience as a really strategic lever, if you like, because it doesn't matter what strategy you have. You have a strategy that may last 5 or 10 years, something is going to get in the way of you getting there, right? So at the end of the day, something in the next 5, 10 years is going to happen. It may be a climate event, it might be a terrorist event, it might be, God forbid, another COVID type event.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't got a resilient organization, you're going to get knocked sideways. So there's an awful lot of things you can do with technology and automation that will enable you to protect against that. And so we see technology as a huge driver of resilience, whether it's making sure that all of your apps are cloud native or at least cloud hosted, making sure that you have the technology to enable your people to work from home, to access the systems they need to in a very secure way without having to go through, old tech VPN type technologies or whatever. So we have an opportunity right now to use technology to drive resilience as a strategic lever, and that's really the emergence position on this. We feel that it's a key strategic, not just a survival, but a strategic driver. And technology is a great answer to it, and automation in particular does enable you to really enhance the human's capability to do the best work they can, but to keep doing it in the environment where they have automation standing beside them as an alternative to pure human labor. So we see it as a hugely valuable tool, and RPA and the orchestration tools, especially as they're cloud-based, really enable that and drive the resiliency of most businesses.
This is a question for Kit then. RPA has become one of the most valuable technologies within the automation ecosystem. And since more and more companies are discovering it, they also discover other technologies like AI, process mining, task mining, workflow automation, and more. Do you believe RPA is the best technology for companies to get started within the world of automation?
So I'm going to say there are 2 routes that we see being really successful in, and it entirely depends what your organization looks like at the point that you get going. The most important thing to do is just do something to get going, full stop. Yeah, because otherwise you can just be paralyzed by what should I do, where shall I start. The 2 models that we see being really successful, and this is where it does really play to the need for orchestration, is some businesses, the human side of the operation. So every business, before they start automating, they've got a very human-centered, centric business. And actually, even when they're very well a human-centric business, because that's what drives your value. But if the human side of the business is relatively controlled, and you haven't got great sight and understanding across who is doing what, where, and value to customers, then it's quite hard to get started with RPA straight away in there, because it's hard to understand where to deploy the bots. What tasks can you automate? What processes can you automate? So in that kind of world, getting started with orchestration across the human side, potentially process mining as well, those kind of things, that's a good place to get started. If you're a pretty well-structured business and you're really slick, you're really happening, and you've got that then more easy to start automating, and view of starting automating in that world, where you can say, don't get process automation, because generally when you struggling to.
Kid, I think you're breaking up a little bit. Your Wi-Fi might be a little down.
Sorry.
We caught most of your answer. If you now that you're back on, is there a way for you to kind of put that in a nutshell, like the last couple sentences in a nutshell? Are you back? Is your transmission again with us, or are you able to speak with us?
No, he's frozen.
Oh, he's
Yeah,
frozen. Okay,
I'm
he's not
frozen.
that decision. All right. Well, we do have two more questions to be so since the people were so nice to ask them. I'd love to get them at least briefly addressed. This one's interesting. Seeing the rapid evolution of AI and RPA, do you think it is possible that AI can be taught to adapt its own RPA scripts? In other words, will the robots rebel and take us over? Guy, is RPA going to write its own RPA?
Well, it is going to write its own RPA,
Nope.
but it will only follow the rules that are set for it by humans.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I say that is that if you remember, I mentioned about two acquisitions we made before Christmas, Process Gold and Stepshot. So they're now known as UiPath Process Mining and Task Mining.
Mm-hmm.
The reason you need both is because the task mining looks at what the human input is. And so the key at a keyboard level. The process mining looks at the output. In other words, what's happening on the systems that you are interacting with. Mm-hmm. So by combining both, at the moment, what they're producing is, for the technically minded, a PDD, a process description document, or a XAML script, an XAML script. That goes to the RPA developer that can then develop the robot for the subject matter expert, for the user. Ultimately, using machine learning, using other technologies, it will work out what the optimum path is through that route automatically, and then write the code for that will become the robot. So in other words, the person won't have to do anything, but they'll just do their normal work, and the system will then say, the assistant will then say, okay, I can automate this process for you now. That's self-building robots. Now, we're not there yet, right, but that's the direction of travel. And then, as I mentioned, when things change, the system has to keep up with that, and through learning, and in which case you get self-building, self-healing robots. So it doesn't have to go back to the developer when things change. It will just say, okay, there are exception levels have gone up, and we need to reconfigure. So yes, ultimately, machine learning and other AI technologies will be used to write the own code, but it will always be checked and orchestrated by the humans.
Kit, I see you're back with us. Were you able to sort of summarize your last point there? You were kind of on a roll. I want to make sure we didn't lose that point.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, it was. If you're well controlled, well orchestrated across your human workforce, then you can go straight into RPA and other automation technologies, because you've got the clarity of what's happening there. If you're not well controlled and managed across your human workforce, then start with orchestration, process mining, task mining to get that side under control, because then your automation will be much more successful and much more rapid.
Gotcha. Makes perfect sense. One last question, David. Do you believe there's any industry that will not be affected by automation? And I can't believe there is, but I'd like to hear your opinion.
No, I think, automation, I think in one form or another will come to all industries. There are certain tasks that I don't think will be automated, or we would want to have automated. I mean, a lot of, caring tasks, or tasks which are, around the human to human, interaction. Whilst they possibly could be automated, it's not necessarily desirable. However, I think all of the processes around those, so if you think about medicine or care services or whatever, there's huge opportunity to automate the administration and the business processes that go around those tasks. And we are already seeing robots and automation in the caring space. I just don't think it's going to replace it. I think it's, there's an extent to which automation just becomes undesirable as a human. And I think, we will only, and we should only really be driving automation and, processes to the extent that it makes sense as humans to enjoy a better standard of living or a better way of working. So
Right.
I'm an optimist in that we're going to continue to want to use technology for good. I think the extent to which it goes beyond that just becomes, you have to ask yourself the question, just because we can, should we?
Right.
And I sense that, it'll be a long time before we get to that stage where where it becomes necessity.
Indeed.
And we already attribute economic value to some things based upon how much humanity's going into them. We all buy expensive coffees made by bearded hipsters.
Totally.
Things that can be automated, but we actually attribute economic value to the fact that they're not.
Right.
And actually, I think COVID has actually thrown up the fact that it's becoming more and more important. There's an ethical issue here. So automation has no ethics.
Right.
It can't do it. Can't have that. It can't have that empathy that humans need so desperately. Or you can almost see, as a result of automation, digital transformation, and COVID, we're having to create, or should create perhaps, a new ethical framework through which organizations interact with their customers and their employees. So citizen experience or customer experience and employee experience. So a new social contract, if you like. Now that's work that the World Economic Forum and the EU are working on, and the EC, the European Commission, are working on right now, and we're involved in that process. But it's it's going to take a long time. But I think it's important that we actually become part of that.
I think it is time based. I mean, there are plenty of organizations out there researching how to make computers more empathetic, how to make their facial reactions very natural, how to make them understand emotion and respond appropriately. And I think over time we will try to create systems and processes and computers that are more and more human. And who's to say over time we might not prefer that version of it than the human version? But I think we are a little way off that yet. And yet, there's a lot of companies out there working on it. So, I'm sure that some things will evolve that will get us in that direction. But I don't think it's in the realm of, something we need to be concerned about in the next 5 to 10 years as, replacing humans in, in society and the way we want to live and work.
Well, certainly the work of journalists and interviewers can never be replaced. We need live people in that particular case. I think we're clear on that. At any rate, I thank the three of you for your expertise. I certainly learned a lot. I'll send you the video when it's all edited, and thank you very much.
Well, it's our pleasure.
Take care. It was
Thank
great.
you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much indeed for doing that.
Thank you.
All right.